with R's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the XRAY GTXE 23 edition, bag 4, the rear suspension. So let's get started. So we're going to set the chassis aside for now, since we're going to assemble the hub and axle. Be careful when opening the bag of hardware. You don't want to lose anything. Alright, so we're going to need to make 2 setups, one for the right side, one for the left side. So we're going to need the hubs, the axles. We're going to need these. We're going to need 2 2.5 by 13 millimeter pins. We're going to need these. We've got the hubs. We're going to need 2 13 by 19 by 4 millimeter bearings. And we're also going to need 2 8 by 16 by 5 millimeter bearings. Then we're going to need the wheel hexes, the 3 by 17 millimeter pins, and the M5 by 4 millimeter set screws. So now we can assemble this together. We can go ahead and install the bearings first. So the smaller bearing is going to be on the outside. Okay. Next we're going to need some of the graphite grease. So that's how you're going to install it. You want to be able to see the hole once it's installed. So I'm going to put a little bit of graphite grease on there. So you're going to go ahead and install it in that manner. And next what you're going to do is, so you're going to line up the holes like so, and then you're going to insert the 2.5 by 13 millimeter pin to go through everything so it's locked into place. So now we can install this like so, and then we can install the hex on, and what you're going to do is you're going to line up the holes again, this hole and this hole, and install the 3 by 17 millimeter pin. So once that's installed, we can put some thread locker onto the set screw, and this set screw will lock that pin into place so it won't pop out. So now with the thread locker installed, you can go ahead and tighten down that set screw to hold that 3 by 17 millimeter pin into place. Make sure that pin is sitting flush and not popping out, and you can go ahead and hold it with a wrench. I'm just going to use my shock wrench to kind of hold that 17 millimeter hex and just tighten down on that set screw. So now this side is done. I'm going to do the other side. And there we go. Now I can move on to the next step where we're gonna install these assemblies onto the chassis. So let's grab the chassis. We're gonna need to do this on both sides. We're gonna need shims for the wheelbase adjustment, which are gonna be on these trees right here, these parts trees. So we need 2 1mm shims and 1 2mm shim. Trim off any excess so it doesn't grab onto anything while you're driving. So we're gonna need 2 1mm on each side and 1 2mm on each side. And then lastly, what we're gonna need is this special hinge screw along with a M3 lock nut. And the hole that we're going to be installing it in is going to be this one right here, the bottommost hole. So we're going to install the hinge pin on the outermost hole in the control arm. And then we're going to install 2 shims. Then we're going to install the hub. And then lastly, we're going to install the 2mm shim in between the hub and the control arm. Just like so. It moves nice and smooth. And lastly, we're going to put that lock nut on. We don't want to over tighten the lock nut. We want to make sure that it doesn't cause any binding. So we're just going to tighten it up until we see it shoulder up onto the control arm. And we know that in this position here, it doesn't move back and forth. And the lock nut, the screw or threaded portion of the screw is in the nylock portion of the lock nut. So everything still moves nice and free. So we're set on this side. Now we can do the other side. Now I can move on to the next step. We can set the chassis aside for now while we assemble the camber links. So we're going to grab our 2 camber links. We're going to need 4 rod ends, and we're going to need our balls for the rod end. So I want to do something different than the manual because X-Ray likes to put the left hand and right hand threads on a different side compared to industry standard. Industry standard is usually having the left hand thread on the left side of the car. That way when you adjust on either side, it's the same motion. But on X-Ray, they put the right hand thread towards the center of the car and the left hand thread on the outside of the car. So take note of that if you want to make it in that orientation, or if you want to follow along, I'll show you how to put the orientation in the industry standard method. Okay, so if you look closely at the rod, you'll see a little notch here. So this side means it's left hand threaded, this side is right hand threaded. So One way to make things easier is you can put a little bit of oil on the threads to help install the rod ends a little easier. So this side is left-hand thread, so we're going to turn counterclockwise. Okay, so we got that side started. We can now install on the other side and then slowly work our way to getting the right length, which is 18 millimeters. So remember, this is now right-hand threaded. Okay. So the initial setting is supposed to be 18 millimeters. So we can work our way to 18 millimeters from shoulder to shoulder. So I'm going to use this one on the right-hand side. So we want to check the orientation of where we're going to install these balls, because one ball is just straight on both ends and one side has a flange. So the flange goes on the inside of the car. So since this is going to be on the right side, it's going to install on the left hand threaded portion. Okay, now I can hold the turnbuckle and rotate the rod ends using a hex driver. Okay, we're right at 18 millimeters. So this one's done. Set this aside since I'll be using this on the right side of the car. Put it over here. I can set up the next side. Left-hand thread, this is going to be on the left-hand side of the car. We want the right-hand thread to be on the inside of the car. That means it'll install with the ball with the flange. All right, 17 millimeters. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and install this on the car and then adjust it to 18 millimeters because it'll be easier to adjust it when it's on the car. Okay, left hand side, right hand side. Left hand side, right hand side. So now we're going to need our carbon fiber pieces and basically the rest of the hardware. So let's start with installing the carbon fiber pieces. It's going to install in this orientation in the outermost and innermost hole on the rear portion of the hub. It's going to be installing in the middle right here. So we need 2 M3x14 screws, and we're going to need 2 lock nuts as well. So screws go through from the back, and then the lock nuts will install in the middle. better angle at this. And you don't need to tighten it too tight, just enough to make sure that there's no movement or play. It's nice and snug. Now we can install the right turnbuckle, which is going to have the notch facing the center of the car and the flange facing the rear of the car. We're going to need the flathead screw, which is a M3 by 20 millimeter, and a M3 lock nut. Okay, so the initial setting for this, there's 4 holes in this piece, and we're going to be installing the turnbuckle in the second hole from the top. It's going to go like this, and then we're going to install a lock nut at the back. Then lastly, I want to make sure that the axle is installed in the outdrive, and we're going to install the turnbuckle. It's going to be in the lowermost position back here. So it's going to install using a M3 by 18 screw and a lock nut. So the screw is going to go in from the back side, nice and snug. Now we can do the other side. Make sure your axle's in. And now, since this side wasn't quite 18 millimeters, you can adjust it since it's installed. All right. So now you know moving it forward is going to make the turnbuckles longer on both sides. And if you move it back, it's going to make it shorter. We're at 18 millimeters on both sides. So that concludes bag 4, the rear suspension. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found something helpful. Please stay tuned for the next video where I tackle bag 5, the front suspension. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks.